All right, welcome to Chalk Talk with Chuck. I think this is episode 8. Um, I've got back with me again upon high demand. O'Reilly Goodejohn Goody Boy Lamb. He's got a billion nicknames and none of them make any sense. A lot happened in sports. The NBA has to be so thankful for the deadline. The trade deadline came, I think, in my opinion, probably the most exciting NBA trade deadline I've seen in a couple of years, if not ever, as far as like actual stars being traded. Nikola Vucevic, who's a good player, was traded to Chicago for Otto Porter and Chandler. What's that kid's first name?
Hutchinson.
Yeah, Chandler Hutchinson. Um, and I think some future picks, which is huge. He's a good player. Zach LaVine's going to be the best player he ever played with. And it looks like Orlando is just emptying out. They traded Evan Fournier to Boston for picks, like second round picks, and they traded Aaron Gordon to Denver for what's that kid's name?
RJ Hampton.
Who?
RJ Hampton.
RJ Hampton. That's who they got for him?
Yeah, and Gary Harris.
And Gary Harris. Yeah. Gary Harris, to me, it's like they lost a perimeter defender and a culture guy. Gary Harris seemed to be like a locker room guy, and I don't, I don't really know what Denver gets for Aaron Gordon. The most he's probably averaged in his career is 19 points, which isn't bad, but what's his career accomplishment? Coming in second in the dunk contest twice? I just don't. I'm not an Aaron Gordon guy, and I don't get why he can demand a trade. I, Player empowerment, whatever, all for it. Doesn't really matter to me. What matters is the fact that this guy was never an all-star, and he's like, I'm not happy here, I want to be traded. It's like, dude, just be happy to have the fucking job. What are you bringing to the table? How many wins do you think you're worth? 5? You can demand trades once you've been a multi-time all-star, or your team's completely falling apart, or it's like a Markel Fultz in Philadelphia situation. But you can't demand a trade as Aaron Gordon being the third best guy on the 8th team in the East. Just be happy to have the fucking job, dude. It's ridiculous. It made me not a fan of his, like, honestly. So weird. So that happened, and then Oladipo is the other big name to get traded. He leaves Houston, which obviously wasn't ever going to be a permanent residency for him, to go play in Miami, who's been eyeing him for what feels like the majority of the year. They get the deal done. Do you know who got shipped from Miami, Riley? Kelly Olynyk
Wasn't it Avery Bradley?
and Avery Bradley, who I didn't even know was on Miami. I know that he played for the Lakers last year. And I think, a couple of picks, of course. And I think Miami's better for it. I don't know what this version of Oladipo is going to do for them, but I think he gives them another slasher, and sort of another athletic guy who can create his own shot, which I think they desperately needed. Tyler Hero he's good, but he's not quite to the like creating his own shot on every play, running an offense through the guy, ball handling every possession type of person. And I think Oladipo is going to bring that to them and be a good contributor for them in the starting lineup. A bunch of other smaller trades happened. JaVale McGee got traded, which was what kicked off free agent, or not free agency, the trade deadline. And it's so funny. The NBA trade deadline always has these rumors like Blake Griffin unhappy in Los Angeles when he was on the Clippers, and like, where might Blake Griffin go? And there was always like, well, they could trade him for Kevin Love and Cleveland, and he could bring a little bit more to that team, or X, Y, and Z with Blake Griffin, and then it just never ended up happening because why, you know? Um, and it takes two things. It takes a player being really upset, and it takes a team when it comes to a superstar being traded. A team not happy with the player they got, and the player not being happy with where they are. And I think that that's what happened with Victor Oladipo. Or there's the second scenario, which is what happened in Orlando, And it's like, well, we've really got a shot to tank for the top 3 picks here, or a tank for a much better draft pick than we're going to get if we hold on to these guys. We got a bunch of young guys that we really like. Fuck it. Let's just empty out. And they emptied out. And that's, I don't know how that's going to work for Orlando. I don't want to call it a rebuild because what are you rebuilding from? The worst team to make the playoffs every year? I don't know. Really weird. And the NBA is lucky that they have these like new faces and new places every single year, and now happening in the middle of the year because LeBron James, Joel Embiid, and Steph Curry, arguably the 3 most popular guys, and I'll throw Giannis in there, but 3 of the most popular guys in the NBA go down with long sustained injuries, and Anthony Davis is already out. He's a popular guy, so you've got 3 guys, now 4 guys in the league that were in the MVP conversation all season long who now are A, disqualified from the MVP conversation, and B, out for multiple weeks. Yet the NBA isn't going to skip too much of a beat on its screen time because they had this electric trade deadline. The trade deadline goes like it does any other year, any other year. The NBA doesn't get as much screen time. Now, they're lucky that they had all the rumors to begin with because it gave them something to fill the gap. This part of the season's usually pretty boring for just like middling fans of the league anyway. But man, they're lucky. Because there's so many people who are just LeBron James fans. And that's what you get when you get player empowerment. You get guys who are just fans of players. And I'm sure there are a lot of guys who are just Joel Embiid fans, and there's a ton of people who are just Steph Curry fans. And all 3 of those guys are gone, not to mention the AD fans who are kind of like, eh. Now that LeBron's gone, they're definitely like, I'm not going to watch the playoffs. But you get, a reinvigorated fan base when there's a bunch of moves right before the deadline. You're going to recapture Chicago because there's no way they're not making a push for the playoffs now. They got 2 All-Stars. They got Levine and Vucevic. I mean, they have to make the playoffs in the East. I think they're dangerous too, but you have reinvigorated fan bases across the country, and now it's exciting. And, Milwaukee made a bunch of moves before the deadline too, and they've been playing great. They've won 7 or 8 straight. They're playing really good. So it feels like, the NBA just got really lucky again. And they're really lucky in the off season because of the player empowerment movement has been nothing but good for them in the off season. Right? They've got guys leaving and going to new places every single year. It keeps your eyes glued on to Twitter for Woj to drop a bomb, or keeps you listening to NBA talking heads because they're all talking about the scenarios about where Kevin Durant's going to be next year. It's, the NBA is just so lucky for that. And with LeBron out, I was thinking a lot this week about this, and I don't know why I was thinking so much about it, but LeBron really changed the way, and it has to do with the excitement of the season. This is how I'll tie it into the conversation before. The NBA season lacks excitement in a lot of ways. It's really long. It's kind of hard to follow. The NFL has a really exciting season. It's the perfect amount of games. It's easy to follow. The games are on the same day every week. The NFL's got the perfect season. They've got it figured out, right? You have the perfect amount of games, the perfect amount of intensity per game. They mean they mean the right amount, and the games are on the same day every week. I mean, you have the one Thursday night game, you have the one Monday night game, but the games follow a pattern. The NBA, the games don't follow a pattern because the season's so long and regular season games tend not to matter. And then LeBron did this thing where it's like, well, none of it fucking matters because as long as I make the playoffs, I'm probably going to the finals. Right? Or it doesn't matter where I land because my team is going to be considered at least for the conference championship every year. And he's going to prove that again this year. LA is awful without him. Their second best players, like the best players on their roster right now without him and AD, are Schroeder, Harkless, and Kuzma. That team is a bottom third team in the NBA every year. And they're going to just trot him out there every night while LeBron's out. And, they're going to lose a bunch of games, and it doesn't matter. They can finish the West in the 6th seed. And yeah, maybe LeBron has to, win every series on the road, which means in each series he's going to have to win at least one road game. And that's an accomplishment. Boom, another accomplishment on the LeBron belt. But he makes seeding in the regular season almost pointless. Maybe you could make the argument it is pointless. I mean, if they drop to 8 and they play Utah in the first round, as long as AD and LeBron are healthy, I guarantee Vegas has the odds for the Lakers to win that series. Guarantee it. What's the fucking point of that, man? It's insane. He rewrote the rules. And it makes me really, it does make me understand why people don't really like watching the NBA. I love watching it because I like the product, but I understand. Like, if there's a guy like LeBron James in the league who's just going to go to the finals every year, unless you love appreciating dominance, what's the fucking point? Or at least that can be the point of somebody. I would argue that, it's really fun to watch this guy who's, a physical freak go out there and continue to do it and see what these other teams are doing just to stop him. I mean, look what Golden State did. They brought in Kevin Durant. And now look at what Durant did in Brooklyn. He knows what it takes to beat LeBron in the finals. He's like, I need Harden and Kyrie. I mean, it's incredible. No one in their right mind thought Miami even stood half a chance against the Lakers in the finals last year. And the only teams that I think could beat them in the finals in the East are Milwaukee, maybe Philadelphia, but I doubt it, only because of Ben Simmons' defense in Philadelphia, and Brooklyn. And I don't really know if there's a team in the West that can stop them. I want to say Utah. I want to really badly, but yeah, I don't see it. And the sad thing is for teams like Utah, whom I'm a huge fan of, seeding is everything. We have to capture the 1 seed. We have to be the best team in the West, because if we want to beat LeBron, it's going to take 7 games, and we need that home court advantage. We need it. Doesn't matter for LeBron. He won Game 7 on the road in Oakland against the greatest NBA regular season team of all time. He beat them 3 straight games. Doesn't matter for him. But it matters so much for Utah. It matters for Denver. It matters for Phoenix. And, if you're looking at it, for teams like Utah, Denver, and Phoenix, this window of, finals contention is small. And they've got to capitalize immediately. And LeBron's just a monster, man. He's just, the ultimate final boss. It's unbelievable. But yeah, the NBA just had a bunch of deadline stuff. Any huge deadline things I'm missing, Riley?
Rondo and Lou Williams.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Lou Will, I was also thinking about this today. Lou Will got traded from the Clippers to the Hawks. And didn't Lou Will play for the Hawks for a little bit? Or was that Jamal Crawford? I feel like Lou Will played for the Hawks, next to Jeff Teague. I could be wrong about that. But Lou Will gets traded to the Hawks, and the Hawks trade Rondo over to the Clippers. And Rondo, brings the Clippers something that I think they need, and that's stability on the perimeter at the starting position for the point guard. I don't exactly know what they're going to do with Pat Bev. I'm sure they'll keep him out there because of the defensive thing, and Pat Bev's one of those guys that really fucking pisses other people off, man. He pisses me off just watching. I think he really pisses players off playing against him. And, Rondo's not exactly a quiet guy out on the court either. But Rondo's going to bring them a little bit more stability and some championship sort of juice that I think they need outside of Kawhi. Kawhi's obviously he's known as a quiet guy. I don't know how he is in the locker room, but he seems sort of like the lead by example, not lead with your voice type. And maybe Rondo can do a little bit more of the vocal leadership for the team. There's this weird vibe with the Clippers, and it just feels like no one's scared of them. And I think part of that is they feel disorganized, and they feel like they don't have this guy to point to say, initiate this, or pick the vibe up. And I'm not saying Rondo's like king of vibes or anything like that, but maybe he just brings in a little bit of a different thing that helps get Kawhi and Paul George more motivated to win the finals. It's so weird, but it seems like Paul George just gets into the playoffs and he sucks, and it seems like it's maybe a motivational thing. I don't know. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right, Riley? Like, Paul George is just butt in the playoffs.
Mental.
Yeah, just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I guess, I mean, the Jazz traded for some guy in Toronto for like picks and space. I guess he can shoot threes. I can't even remember his name. Drummond is going to get bought out, and I bet he lands in Boston. I think the Fournier, I didn't talk about that too much. I think the Fournier fit in Boston is pretty nice, actually. It's weird to say, yeah, Boston probably needed another wing kind of guardish type guy because Tatum and Brown seem like they're, switchable as far as like the position that they play, but I think Fournier brings a nice little stability to them. You know for a fact that they swung really hard at trying to get Aaron Gordon in that deal too. They couldn't get it done. And they traded Tice for Mo Wagner. And yeah, the Wiz traded Trent Brown. What's that kid's name? Troy, yeah,
Chicago.
to Chicago for.
Hutchinson.
I thought Hutchinson was a part of the Vucevic deal.
Hutchinson's going to Washington.
Oh.
Porter's going to Orlando.
Oh, yeah. So they got rid of like two guys. I was hoping Porter would get bought out and sign with the Jazz. Maybe he still will. I doubt it, though. They're going to keep him down there, and he's going to rot in Orlando just like everyone else does. It sucks.
Marcus Aldridge, I think, signed with
Oh, yeah. Aldridge got bought out, and he's going to sign with Miami. I think that gives them a nice guy off the bench, maybe a piece that they need off the bench. I don't see him starting anymore in the NBA. He aged. Man, he aged so quick. He was so great. Even that first year he was a Spur, he was good. But, man, he was so great as a Blazer playing next to Dame. He was really, really good. And the Lakers didn't do anything in free agency, are not free. I keep saying free agency. They didn't do anything in the trade market, which surprised me. I thought maybe they'd try to move Harkless, but oh well. All right, that's the true end of the NBA stuff. We'll move on to the NFL. Okay, NFL stuff. Also, before the NFL stuff, Holly, keep this plug in. This is a plug for you. Holly does all the editing. I am doing all of these on one take because I have a job and I spend all of my time when I'm not working following sports and then recording this. And so most of the podcasts, if not all of the podcasts, are a single take, which means there's a lot of ums and ahs and uhs and ands, and Holly edits all that shit out. So if you have a paying job and you're listening to this for someone who edits podcasts or does audio work in general, or fucking whatever within this sort of world, hire my sister. I think we're going to have her on to guest maybe next week or the week after. She's actually going to be on the pod. We have a fun little segment we're going to do together. But here's some NFL stuff for everybody. So I've been talking about it for a couple weeks now with the Deshaun Watson thing, and I think that if I just ignore it and not talk about it, that's not really fair. Actions have consequences, and if the allegations against Deshaun Watson are true, which from my perspective it's looking more and more like they are, I don't think you have 24 organized masseuses getting together at the National Masseuse Convention going after the third, fourth highest paid quarterback in the NFL. I just doesn't seem realistic. But he should probably not be playing football, and should probably just be happy to be in Texas and have a starting job. Now, that's not traditionally the Goodell or the NFL approach. That is what it is. Obviously, I can't do anything about it, but, for him, I hope, if these things are true, I hope, he seeks the help he needs and everything is addressed appropriately. But it wouldn't be fair for me to talk about his trade value and then just be like, well, allegations, I'm not going to say anything about that. The allegations are kind of nasty and they're really weird. And not weird in like a like oh they might not be true way. Weird in a like dude what the fuck way. Um. Anyway, I just thought I'd say that dude should just be happy to be in in Texas right now and should just be happy to still be a quarterback. And not be in jail. More bright, shiny, fun news is to me, this is fun because I think the Giants made a mistake that I'm going to address later in the pod. Early on in their quarterback's career, and they're trying to adjust for it, but the Giants have loaded up. And not like crazy loaded up, but they've silently gotten a lot of good things for Danny Dimes. They got Kenny Galladay. Um, they have Saquon Barkley, who I think everybody believes is a good running back, even though he keeps getting injured. There are other good receivers on that team, and the offensive line isn't bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's not awful. And the defense, they have one all-pro corner already, and they brought in Adoree Jackson. I can't remember the other corner's name, or at least he was a Pro Bowler. And they have Blake Martinez, who I think is one of the most solid players on the defensive side of the football in the NFL. And I think the Giants really have enough to win that wacky ass division. They almost won it last year, but they definitely have enough now, considering the pieces that they've gathered during free agency. And this is the prove it Daniel Jones year to me. He was a first round pick. He got hurt last year. He's shown flashes of maybe being, the guy, but he feels like maybe he's not. And if he can't get it done with the team that they're putting around him this year, he's probably never getting it done. And the Giants got to start thinking about going another direction at quarterback. It kind of feels like the situation for the other New York team this last year, where they brought in Le'Veon Bell, they brought in some other pieces to surround Sam Darnold with. They brought in guys on the defensive side of the ball, and it did nothing. It didn't move the needle at all. They were still one of the worst teams in the league. And I remember preseason last year, people talking about the Jets being sneaky good. And now we're at this point where it's like, well, they're obviously going to be drafting for or trading for the quarterback of their future. And it feels the same way with the Giants right now. Do I think Daniel Jones is a little bit better than Sam Darnold? Not really. Not from what I've seen, but maybe. He's got Kenny Galladay. He's got Saquon Barkley. He's got, two Pro Bowl corners and Blake Martinez on the defensive side of the ball. They got the pieces. Now it's just time, to lead them to the playoffs in a division where the other quarterbacks are Ryan Fitzpatrick, Dak Prescott, who's coming off one of the most gruesome injuries in the NFL, and who's the other team in that division?
Eagles, Giants.
Oh, and Jalen Hurts? Maybe? The fucking Eagles are a disaster. So if you can't pull out the 6 to 7 wins required to win that division, then especially when you've got guys like Galladay on your offense, then it's time to start looking somewhere else. I like Kenny Galladay, man. He saved my fantasy team so many times. I always pick that dude. Don't think I'll do it this year. Juju returns to Pittsburgh. I have so many mixed emotions about this because I don't like spending money on receivers, but we didn't pay anything for him. He's on a 1-year deal. I don't like the locker room distractions of the dancing and stuff, and maybe that's just me being an old man and the TikTok thing really isn't that big of a deal. I don't know. But I love Juju as a player. Big, physical, hard-nosed football player for being a wide receiver. And I really like that about him. And he really likes Pittsburgh, and I really like that about him. I like a lot about Juju. He's a Pac-12 guy. I saw him play in college. He is a good blocker. He does his job, and he likes to see his teammates succeed, which is a big thing for me too, especially at a skill position. And he took a really nice deal to come back and play for Pittsburgh for only 1 year. And I hope that we can pay him a little bit more in the future because he does want to stay in Pittsburgh. And I think that he's the heart and soul of that receiving core that we have. But, the part that's hard for me is the, I don't like reading headlines in the middle of the season about my receiver, getting blown up after doing dances on the other team's logo. If we can cut that shit out, Juju's the perfect receiver. He's Hines Ward 2.0. Hines Ward was like my favorite player growing up. Him and Troy Polamalu. I mean, I loved Hines Ward. We still have his fat head at my house in Park City. And Juju, in so many ways, reminds me of Hines Ward. And I think that if we can just get him to cut some of the other shit out, he's going to be such a solid fit for us. So solid. And such a great example in the locker room. Think of the culture he's setting for the rest of that receiving core with Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Like, it's fun to be here. It's not like this in other areas. I think he saw what happened to Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, and was like, fuck that. I mean, I know Antonio Brown just won a Super Bowl or whatever, but like he's not ever been the receiver he was in Pittsburgh. He's fuck that. These fans embrace you here. Pittsburgh fans are the best football fans in the NFL to their players. So I'm really happy to have him back. Probably gonna buy his jersey after that. Just because it's like, fuck yeah, dude, way to stay loyal. Love it. Thank you, Juju. No way you're ever listening to this, but your cousin G Mac went to college with me, and lived in like the same dorm building as me. Cool dude. Shout out G Mac. The Niners spent a lot of money on Trent Williams, which he deserves because he's a massive human being and he's a really good player. But man, they spent a lot of money on an aged lineman. Although Andrew Whitworth played for a while. Is Andrew Whitworth still playing? He got hurt last year, right?
Yeah, as far as I know.
I don't know. Whitworth has been in the league for. I'm pretty sure my child will be born and Andrew Whitworth will still be blocking for somebody. But they spent a lot of money on Trent Williams, and I think it's the right move. Spend money on the O-line. I know he's a little old, but spend money on the O-line, especially if you're going to run that speed offense that they run. A lot of running plays, a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of deception there. Shoring up the ends is a big deal. I don't know if they're going to stick around and stay with the Jimmy G project. Jimmy G is an interesting, quarterback. He threw for 300 yards that one game in the Superdome when he went toe to toe with Drew Brees, and then he has games where they only let him throw 8 times. It's weird. And I don't know if that's just Shanahan being Shanahan, but clearly I think he wants to unlock the offense a little bit more. And maybe he will. Way to spend money on the O-line. I can always respect that. Miami spent a bunch of money. Miami spent a bunch of money in free agency, and I just don't know if it moves the needle. It feels like the same thing as New England. It's not going to push it past Buffalo. And I don't think Buffalo's like this tyrant that can't be taken down. I think there are other teams in the AFC that are better than Buffalo. But is Tua really the answer? I don't know. It seems hard to be like Tua's garbage. Because he's not. He's a good player. Or at least he was a great college player. Well, from what I saw last year, his pro debut was a bit rough. Or his rookie year was a bit rough. He also had one of the weirdest, sort of ugliest injuries I've ever seen. I mean, the guy's hip was so fucked up he started bleeding out of his nose because of the pressure. Like, okay, and it's not like the ACL. I think we've become really accustomed to like ACLs 1 year you come back and you're pretty much 100. I think people forget that other injuries take more time. Like the Achilles clearly takes a little bit longer. But this hip injury, like how many guys do this year? How many like hip specialists are there that handle that specific injury? The ACL, I feel like at this point they got it down to a science. With his, I'm sure the rehab is different for everybody. Maybe he comes out and he's an absolute gunslinger this year. He's the Tua we saw in Alabama. But just doesn't feel like enough to move the needle past Buffalo. The NFL draft is coming up, and I'm excited for this. Partially because I have a friend who's just addicted to sending me draft shit, and by the time the draft is there, I'm just like, can this be over? Because if I've got to look at one more mock draft of who the Niners are going to take, I'm going to blow my fucking head off. And I always, and then I get into these mock drafts, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what they said about the Niners. What are they going to do with the Steelers? And I stress and overthink the Steelers thing, and then they do the same thing every year. They just take a defensive player and an O-lineman. Which is good. That's how you should do it. Yeah, there's gonna be a bunch of mock drafts thrown my way, and I'm excited about it. I thought that I would break down for you guys as the listeners what I think the right approach to drafting is. Because I think a lot of teams make mistakes in drafts and it just doesn't pay off at all. Um, my approach, if I were a GM and I was, let's just say the GM of, I don't know, let's just say like the Jets. We got the second pick this year. I'm not really sure how I feel about my quarterback. There are quarterbacks on the board. Got a decent defense, a decent offense. Nothing to brag about. Skill positions could use improvement, and the list goes on. If I'm not 100% sold on the quarterback that I'm taking with the second pick, if I'm not 100% sold that that person is going to be the future of my franchise, I'm drafting on the defensive line or the offensive line. I'm not drafting skill position, and maybe I'll draft secondary. If there's a guy like Mika Fitzpatrick or Jamal Adams up, draft secondary. But if they're not there, I'm drafting defensive line or offensive line. Because those are the two most important places outside of quarterback in the league. New England proved it, and you know who really proved it were the Niners 2 years ago, where their defensive line was just a bunch of first round picks that they had accumulated over the years. Their offensive line was a lot of the same, and just a lot of high draft picks that they had put on each side of the football on the line, and it carried them to a Super Bowl, and they should have won that Super Bowl. Should have won it. And I think that that would be the way that I would approach it. And nobody does that. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, everyone's talking about all the receivers in the draft this year and all that. Guess what? There's good receivers every year in the draft. Last year was an insanely good receiving class. This year's going to be insanely good. The year before that, pretty goddamn good. Right? You can get receivers. You know what you can't get? A great left tackle. Penny Sewell. Can't get him every year. Draft those positions. Surefire offensive linemen and defensive linemen. They change the game for you. I know there's this kid out of Florida that plays tight end that's really good, and it's really rare that there's a tight end that goes this high. So I don't know if I want to make a tight end exception for this theory of mine, and maybe I do because guys like Travis Kelce really fuck shit up for other teams' defenses because you can't put a linebacker on them, and then you got to go nickel every time, and then if you go nickel, you can just run the ball on a draw, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on and on. But, man, it just feels like always shore up those two areas of your team. And if you run a 3-4, get a nose tackle or a good edge rusher, linebacker. And it works, man. It works. You want to know why the Steelers never go below 500? And they haven't since Tomlin was head coach? Because Tomlin doesn't draft skill position guys in the first round. It's not sexy. It's not fun. Doesn't fire up the fan base to take, another D lineman or another O lineman, but it works. But let's say for some reason you are a really good team and you have those two things and you're still high in the draft, right? Then what do you do? And you don't have your franchise quarterback, and you don't think you're going to get your quarterback, well, then you go hunting for these other things. You look middle linebacker, you look corner, you look wide receiver maybe. But man, why would you take a receiver so early? There are good receivers falling left and right out of the first round. Claypool was not a first rounder. He had 11 touchdowns for Pittsburgh last year. 11. Justin Jefferson, was he a first rounder? Yeah, he was. Late first rounder. I don't know. It just felt, a Juju, not a first rounder, Pittsburgh. It just doesn't feel like it. Who are some other great receivers aren't first rounders, Riley?
That aren't first rounders?
Yeah.
Chark?
Yeah, DJ Chark. Laviska Shenault.
Yeah.
They're good guys. The point is they're good guys that fall out of Antonio Brown, fucking fifth rounder.
Yeah. I would have to really think.
Yeah, you got to think about it a little bit, but Jalen Samuel, he's not a first rounder, is he? Curtis Samuel, Curtis Samuel, not a first rounder. But yeah, there's these, guys just fall out of the first round of the receiver position. Just happens. Oh, DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf wasn't a first rounder. Like everybody loves DK. Chase down DK. There are just these guys that at skill positions that you can get later on. Le'Veon Bell was a second rounder, and I know I'm just listing Steeler guys, but it's who I follow the most. I mean, Raheem Mostert's undrafted. He's a beast. Jeff Wilson, I don't know when he was drafted. He was great for San Francisco. Philip Lindsay, guy out of Colorado, was undrafted, good running back. I mean, it just all comes down to line play. And I just can't imagine my team, if I'm a GM, being in the draft room and going, I really think we should just take this wide receiver at pick 7. Ask Cincinnati how that went with that kid out of TCU. Who's that kid? John Ross?
He was UW.
UW, yeah. John Ross. But he didn't do anything for Cincinnati. I mean, and I know that there's like guys like Saquon who are these running backs who it's like gotta take them, but to circle back to the Giants thing that I referenced earlier, the Giants took Saquon and they didn't have anything else figured out. Now the guy's been injured all the time. It's a waste. Like, they hadn't drafted Daniel Jones before they had taken Saquon, had they? No. Daniel Jones was the year after Saquon. Because they had Eli still. Right?
Yeah, they did have Eli.
Yeah. So, it didn't make any sense to me. Like, draft your franchise quarterback before you draft your running back that you're going to put next to him for 3 years. 4 years, maybe 5. If you're lucky. That's my draft strategy, and that's my 2 cents going into the draft. That's my podcast for this week. I think we're going to round off here. Probably be edited down into the 30s. That's what my mom said, and yes, my mom gave me advice. She said, Charlie, try to keep it around 30 minutes. Keep people wanting more. Hopefully I do. Thank you for listening. Bye.